Today I would like to talk about our VR research project with seniors and kids. My name is Kenji, and I'm working at Equal Entry as an accessibility consultant. I was born and grew up in Japan, and I'm currently based in Kyoto, Japan. I'd like to thank everyone involved to set up this meetup and giving me this opportunity to talk about the Equal Entry's VR projects. And actually, I have given a similar presentation in Japanese at Ali Tokyo event in January. It was an online event, but we are trying to do hybrid events in Tokyo. If you're interested, please sign up for it. We have a Japanese page in Compass and English page on Meetup. So let's get into the main topic. VR research with seniors and kids. So this is the picture of us testing VR with a pair of senior and a child side by side. And in this project, we worked with two other organizations. The icon on the left says ASLI Group, and we did this test in their facility. And the icon on the right is VR Together. So we tested to see if VR Together software can improve the lives of seniors and also the education of young children at ASLI. Richard is the CEO of VR Together, and I remember that he actually presented here at Ali VR before, and they are creating a virtual reality social game platform. And VR Together is designed to combat loneliness and improve the well-being of everyone. And I think he's here today. So if you have any specific questions about VR Together, I think you can probably answer them. Also, if you're more curious, I'll explain about what VR Together is. But if you're more curious, I think you can go to YouTube and watch the past Ali VR recording of his talk. And here's the picture of members of ASLI Group and members from Equal Entry. ASLI Group in Tokyo has senior home and nursery school and rehabilitation center, and they are working on how to improve the quality of life of senior residents and also provide better education for young kids. At the front row of the image is me and Josh, and ASLI representative. I think he's also here today, so if you have any specific questions about what they do, you might be able to answer the Richard is here and also Josh is here. Thank you very much. Richard have already explained in previous meetup, but let me explain again what VR Together is and what you can do in it. So there are many different fun activities in VR Together. Like on the right, there is a picture of a beach scene. There are 4 chairs surrounding 2 tables. And on the table, there are like blocks with alphabet on each side, and there's a bucket on the ground, and people really like to throw in the blocks into the bucket. You can also play dot-to-dot game in a forest, and you can also fly over Swiss Alps. But let me explain the beach one first. We used the beach scene to let the participants practice the basic controls in the environment, and users can grab the blocks on the table by using the trigger button. And also users can virtually shake hands with each other. That's also our first challenge for them. And in the forest scene, there is a dot-to-dot game where players can connect the dots. It was great because it did not require any buttons, so it was a little easier than grabbing the blocks or shaking hands. Yeah, we have a similar game in Japan, so I was surprised that this connecting the dots game was a universal thing. So after connecting dots, a camping tools appear, such as like this tent. Players can collect camping goods by keep connecting the dots, floating in the air. So more they connect the dots, more camping goods populates the environment. The third environment we chose for this testing was Swiss Alps, and users can fly right on a hot air balloon together and fly over Swiss Alps. And also they can use their virtual camera to take selfies. That was the explanation for the VR Together. Again, if you're more curious about what you can do in the VR Together, you can look at the past Ali VR presentation. So who were the participants? Who did we test with? So seniors from ages 70 to 80, and they go to a day service at Azali Rehabilitation Club to avoid staying at home whole day and to prevent the declining health condition. And they do various activities, including physical rehabilitation and socializing with others. And kids, the age were around 5 or 6, and they go to Azali Preschool. They offer daycare services for children from 0 to 6 years old in the same facility as Azali Rehabilitation Club. And they teach programming and science and technology and STEM education. They also learn to communicate in English through games and physical exercises, which is a little unique in Japan to educate kids in English from early age. I wish I had the education when I was little. We gathered these participants to evaluate if VR Together can help improve the QOL, quality of life of seniors, and improve the education of kids. So this was actually a pilot testing before doing the larger scale testing. We wanted to do a pilot testing by ourselves before actually getting funded and do a larger scale testing. The purpose of doing this pilot testing was first to evaluate the feasibility of VR Together as a tool to improve Azali residents' quality of life. And second reason is to create a repeatable process to do VR user testing. And third, we wanted to verify if seniors and kids can actually use VR. In this image, for example, the hand controllers seem a little too big for kids, and we want to make sure if they can actually use them. Also, we wanted to prepare to get more funding for larger scale research, and also most importantly, share the finding with you guys through this meetup and also the article we published on ACO Entry website. The whole process of testing was like this. We did a small survey before and after the VR experience. And before they get into VR, we gave a controller instruction because VR controllers can be very difficult to use. So the process was we did a small survey first, and then before wearing a headset, we explained how to use the controllers. And then we did the main VR experience, and then we did the after survey. Because it was hard to ask them to write, the Azali staffs asked the kids and seniors the prepared questions, and they took notes. Because this was a pilot testing, we kept the questions very, very simple and minimal. For example, this is the before survey, but VR Together provided us with their past survey to evaluate the mood change of the participants. On the right, that's the original survey. It has so many questions. But in this pilot testing, we simplified down to just 2 questions for the before survey. And we translated those 2 questions into Japanese. First question was, how do you feel at the moment? And the second question was, how much do you know about VR? And same for after survey. This is the survey we did after the VR experience. On the right, again, there's a survey with a lot of questions that VR Together used before in the States, but we only used 3 questions and 2 free text for this pilot testing. And first question, again, was, how are you feeling right now? And second was, how was the experience? And the third question was, do you feel like you want to do this again? And the remaining 2 free text was, what was good or bad about the experience. Once we get the proper funding, we're planning to do many more questions to get more precise data for this test. But for this one, we kept it very simple. And because we asked how they feel before and after the VR experience, we got to know how much VR influenced their mood, roughly. So this is the graph. This graph shows the mood change of each participant very roughly. So again, as this was a pilot, we only had 4 participants for this chart. It says one 82-year-old participant did not feel any mood change and they stayed at 1 out of the degree of 10. But one 79-year-old participant experienced a huge improvement from 4 to 10. And 2 other participants at the age of 5 and 6, they stayed at 10 before and after the testing. They were very, very energetic. So the only question was, how are you feeling? This may not be enough at all as an academic quantitative research yet, but this was mainly to verify the whole testing process and the logistics of inviting the participants and doing the survey and testing controllers and doing the VR and doing the after survey. So we're hoping that next time, if we do the larger scale research, we can get more meaningful quantitative results with larger number of participants. After the before survey, we explained how to use the controller. As it turned out, controllers are very difficult, and if you are not familiar with games, it can be very difficult. For example, this senior person on the right tried to put his arm through the controller's ring because Oculus Quest 2 controller has a big ring on each controller. And it was very hard to tell the concept of what the controller is and what it does. And this person tried to shake hands with another person in the virtual environment. Normally, you have to keep holding the controller and get closer to the other virtual hand. But when we said, could you try to shake hands with the kid? The person instinctively removed the controller and tried to use the real hands to shake hands. And it seemed that it was difficult for her to understand why we need to use the controller. And also buttons were very hard as well. Sometimes you have to press once and release, and sometimes you have to press and hold. It was difficult to differentiate those actions. And headsets are still very heavy. Sure, it has improved from the past devices, but this person is putting his hand on his face and showing it was a little exhausting. And we used a head strap that lets you use the dial to stabilize from the back. And it seemed to help a lot, but still heavy. When I had the chance to try Quest 2 Pro headset, in this test, we used Quest 2 headset. But when I tried Quest Pro, the latest one, it felt much lighter, but weight and stability are still issues here. Although we found many usability issues, we also had very good reactions as well. When they first saw each other in the VR, they seemed very, very excited. the child instantly shouted, "Who is it?" And the senior responded, "It's me." And they seemed to enjoy the moment, and we could see that it really brightened their mood, and it actually improved my mood as well. It was a very fun moment. And but the problem was kids learn fast, but it was often difficult for seniors to get the hang of it. The problem was because kids can learn fast, they start playing on their own. And when seniors are struggling, there was no interaction between them. And it was just staffs trying to teach them how to use the controllers. I feel like it would have been better if we had like a tutorial session that requires collaboration. And also, once they get in VR, it seemed like everything was very confusing for them. Even what we think is the simplest instruction was sometimes hard to understand in VR. In this case, I tried to tell the participant to extend their arm. She seemed very confused and stayed still. She might have had a physical limitation and condition, but it looked more like because she was in VR, even extending arm was very hard and she was a little at a loss. And this is just my guess and we need to verify, but it is possible that VR, because it's all new and scary to them a little bit, some people are hesitant to make any physical move at all, such as extending arm or even looking around and rotating their head. From kids, we generally had very good reactions. There are some quotes from them, and one said, connecting the dots game was fun, and some said they want to throw more blocks, bases. And the most excited child said that he really enjoyed punching the other avatar. Obviously, there's no punching feature, but he was like pretending to punch and he was really enjoying. And they seemed that they want to play again, but the shaking hands part was very hard. Seniors had mixed reactions, but mainly positive. They said connecting the dots was fun, and it was nice that I could see the kids doing it first and then learn how to do it myself. So that's where I thought that a collaborative tutorial could have been very helpful. Also, another one said controllers were hard, and also some people enjoyed the Swiss view. And lastly, let me share with you our findings from 3 different points of views. One from user testing and from intergenerational experience, and also from VR accessibility. So from the standpoint of user testing, teaching hand controllers are very, very hard. So I felt like I should have practiced the script more and create a better template script. Also, as I said before, some people hesitate to do even basic motions like looking around and extending arms. So I should have explained that better. In this test, we used a tablet to look into the VR environment without us wearing a headset. And that saved us a lot of time to do troubleshooting when they are having some issues. From the standpoint of intergenerational experiences, some in our group said that it is possible that it was easier to talk via VR than in real life. And yeah, controllers are especially hard for seniors because kids tend to be familiar with the game controllers. We felt like tutorials and us just explaining were not, and it would be better if the tutorial requires co-working. But once they get used to the controls, we had a great interaction between them. And VR accessibility, yes, tutorials are needed, and fewer buttons are better, because VR Together software doesn't require too many buttons. In the forest connecting the dots theme, it doesn't require any buttons, and mostly it uses just one button, and that seemed to help the participant a lot. I also felt like hand controller part was hard, and also obviously there are a lot of people who cannot use hand controllers, so I felt like a VR experiences should be playable without hands. This is what I generally felt. I have been feeling, but some VR experience tend to be limited according to their user's physical ability, but I feel like VR should instead extend their ability. Like, for example, in VR, we can fly around, while in physical world, we can never do. And so instead of only reflecting the real world ability, I thought it'll be fun, and it'll make it more accessible to explore all sorts of different ways to extend the ability. This test was mainly to evaluate the feasibility of VR Together improving the lives of seniors and kids. But as EcoEntry, we are very interested in the accessibility of VR software itself. And to explore that, we have been doing several different projects that let me introduce you to some in the remaining time. So we tried a web framework called A-Frame, and it lets you build 3D environment on browser. And we created this conference building. On the slide, I have pasted the image of bird's eye view of the building drawn. We have a lounge and a conference room and convenience store. It's sort of like a meetup building, and it was built by our talented developer, Celso. He has an architecture background, and also he's a web developer, so it was perfect match. From the entrance, users can use the door on the right to go to the convenience store, and the door on the left to go to the conference room. We did an on-site test in New York and Tokyo. We recruited some people with vision disabilities who are interested in VR. On the top left, we have the image of Katsutoshi-san, who's blind, and he's in Tokyo. Tested with him in Tokyo if our convenience store is usable for him. And we have documented all that in our article, same as the seniors in his article. So if you're curious, please check it out. And also, I think about a year ago, Thomas mentioned in this Ali VR event about alternative text for VR 3D objects. Because in 2D images, we have alt text, but in 3D, what do we have? Like, for example, maybe many of you are familiar with the alt attributes for image on web. And this web line users can read with screen readers what the image is. But for 3D object, for example, we have 3D object of a dog, Shiba dog on the slide, but how can they read it? Currently, file format called GLTF is the standard for 3D objects like PNG or JPEG. In the past meetup, I think Thomas mentioned that we can use the label feature on hubs, but we didn't have a way to embed the alt attributes into the 3D file itself. So we have documented how we do that in the article. And also lastly, I want to introduce, as we did the seniors research, we learned a lot of accessibility features of VR, and Meta has a set of guidelines for virtual reality software called the Virtual Reality Checks. And it is a guideline for Meta Quest software developers. And there are many checks, but 9 of them are related to accessibility. And they're just recommendations and not requirements at the moment, but at least they have something. And 9 of them are about captions and legible text and multiple cues, multiple feedback styles, and also a software should be playable with one hand. Unfortunately, there's no recommendation for no hand controls. Also, we have the display setting and something about color blindness and rotating the view without physical movement, and multiple locomotion style, which is teleportation or free locomotion. Also, everything should be playable with seated position. We focused on the 7th one, rotation. So users should be able to move without physical neck head movement. Meta only says this, it should be playable. Application should provide the user with the option to rotate their view without physically moving their head or neck. But we felt like, how do we do it? They don't document in their guideline. And this might be straightforward for skilled developers, but considering there'll be more and more new developers, we thought it should be documented on how we can actually implement that. Of course, it varies depending on the development environment, but we try to document for the major platform. So we chose Unity and created a simple step-by-step implementation instruction. We feel like simple and clear instructions are important for accessible VR to be a standard thing. To start simple, we focused on one of the possible solutions called snap turning. There are other possible solutions like gaze control or voice control, like saying, look to the right, look to the left, and rotating the view without turning your head. Also, we have eye tracking in latest devices, but our developer called Asan, he helped us document how to implement the snap turning. In our article, we explain what it is and in a video and text, and in a screenshot of Unity editor, we explain step by step on how to actually use your thumbstick to rotate your view without actually rotating your head. And we have published the article to share with you guys. If you are building Unity development, you can use our resources to conform to the 7th check of Meta's accessibility guidelines. And we're trying to do more other stuff. There was a little bit of our other activities. That was it. So thank you for joining. Also, I would like to thank Meryl and everyone involved for organizing this meetup. And extra thanks to Meryl for even helping me fix my English and improve the slide deck in general. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kenji. And let's also give Kenji extra applause. This is his first presentation in English to a group. So it came across really great. Thank you so much, Kenji. I wanted to just share my own personal experience of doing the research study with the senior citizens and the children. If it's not my most memorable event, it's got to be one of my most memorable events from the last year. It was so interesting to work with both of these populations that a lot of times, in the years I've worked in technology, we don't necessarily focus on either of those user experiences. So it was very interesting to get to work on this project as well, and learned a lot. I want to also say that Azali and VR Together, we really appreciate all the work we got to do with them and to actually make the project happen. I mean, I think it's pretty unique to be able to get to bring seniors and children together to do this type of experimental research. And the design of VR Together, really worked quite well because we went into the research study not really knowing, because we hadn't done this type of research study before, how it would work. I think one great thing to look at in the simplicity of design is the way that the experiences are able to be accessed in a more simple manner made it more fun for the participants. And we've done a different study with a very involved controller experience. And especially for people who are older, it's just not intuitive at all. And so the results were, frustration or confusion. So it was a really great experience. I see that we've had some great questions for Kenji. And as we mentioned, we also have Josh Grisdale here from Ozly and Richard Hoagland from VR Together. And the first one we had was, would it be easier for some to get the concept of controlling a VR avatar if they could see their character from an outside view, like controlling a puppet instead of being first person?
I see. So instead of first person, you mean the third person point of view. We can't say anything for something we haven't tried, but it's very possible, because it's possible that one of the reasons why they got confused could be because they were in first person view and they could only see their hands. But we definitely need to try if that helps them in the next test. And maybe Richard has something in his experience or opinion about the point of view.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Richard Hoagland from VR Together. And as everyone else said, Kenji, that was a great talk. Thank you. It's an interesting question. The two challenges that we've seen, one of which I think it addresses, and Kenji spoke to, is the understanding of like their own body as a virtual body in space. So people seem to struggle with the kind of transition from I'm in the real world as normal or as it is, and then I go to this virtual space and the body doesn't come with me. It doesn't translate with me. So people have confusion like whether the hands in front of them are in fact their hands or that there's some other hands there. So I think it would be interesting to see if that would help with understanding, that kind of establishing that connection to the virtual avatar that they're embodying, or something even like a mirror that I know that is now in the Meta home space, where they could just see the one-to-one interaction. The other challenge that I think you all touched on and we've seen is just the trouble around the controllers and their, I guess, physical self. So I would love to know techniques for that, like the example you provided, which was so interesting about putting the controller down to shake the hand. That's certainly another challenge there.
Let's see. Have you considered reevaluating the experience where hand controllers are not required? For example, there's a representation of their hands and arms in VR.
Yeah, I've been recently testing the new Oculus feature of hand tracking, and I'm personally definitely really curious about how they would perform in that feature. But Richard, do you think you can implement the hand tracking feature if that can be tested? I'm very, very curious about reevaluating the test, of course. Yeah, because controller was very hard.
Were you curious about whether we would?
Yeah, hand tracking, is that feasible?
I think they have provided a lot of tools. I will admit that I have not, even in a prototype, played around with it. I agree it can be so much more intuitive. One of the reasons we chose controllers initially is for the haptic feedback, because we're interested in things like holding hands, but it's like, is that worth it with all of the accessibility challenges? Like, is putting all that effort into having haptics for one thing worth the challenges that people face to use it? This is why I really like something like this research, because I think it helps kind of guide that question. And I'm thinking maybe not with the haptics at this point, or it could be an additional feature as opposed to something like at the foundational level, like this is what we focus on.
I'll just throw in there for the hand tracking for myself. And I mean, technology keeps advancing, but when I try to do some of the demos like hand lab interactions on Oculus or some of the things available, I never had the dexterity. It might be my environment or like low lighting, but I never really felt like the fidelity was good enough for me. I would get more frustrated with it's not working seamlessly. So like I prefer the hand controller for how it is now, but that's something that I guess, can be changing all the time. I'm going to call on Dylan Fox now from XR Access, and we were mentioning XR Access multiple times here. So thanks. Hi, Dylan.
Hey, Thomas. Hey, Kenji. Great job on the presentation here. Something I'm curious about is you mentioned this idea of kind of a collaborative tutorial of, we're talking about people's first time in VR, having them do it with other people as opposed to kind of like getting them set up on their own and used to all the buttons and everything before you then put them into a shared environment. And I guess I'd love to hear some more that you're thinking on the pros and cons of that, because I could see on the one hand, it could be hard. There's more stimulation. There's more people to manage at the same time. It's hard to give people individual attention. But on the flip side, you had trouble with getting people to like look around, extend their arms, do things. I think if somebody could be there with them in VR, maybe that's something that could get them to much more naturally do that type of interaction. So I was just curious how you kind of saw that playing out and what you would think about in terms of the ideal version of it for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree on this pros and cons of collaborative tutorials. And that was just one idea I came up in my mind while I was doing the test. So obviously we need to test to see how they would react. In the testing we did, I really felt like it was a shame that there was literally no conversation between them while kids were getting good at it and senior were not. And I felt like ideal tutorial could be very, very basic, very, very step-by-step visual and text and audio instruction, because I have seen many different tutorials for VR and games, but it still assumes a certain amount of knowledge of VR or games, because normally games are created for people who like games. But I saw one VR experience that has really, really basic tutorial with a real image of hand control and hand floating in the air and explaining this is how you hold controllers and this is how you press the control. So I'm sure that collaborative tutorial could create confusion, but I guess it depends on how well you make the tutorial. So we need to test, and not very good precise answer.
And we have another question. Was there any assessment made of the user's functional vision, as this would also significantly impact on their experience? So like how well their vision was.
Of the participants. Yeah, actually we did not ask that. I guess we need to ask that to Josh if they knew about their participants' vision.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the presentation, Kenji. It's an interesting conversation. First of all, I should explain that I work in the marketing department for our company. I'm not really hands-on with the actual clients. So I wasn't involved in the selection of the people who participated. One person did have more limited movement than the others. One, I think, had a stroke previously, but there was no mention of visual abilities of the participants. But that was definitely something that I think we should bring up in the future. Going back to the last question, if it's okay, I think that probably one of the things that needs to be done for the onboarding for the seniors in particular is maybe even a basic what is VR. I think a lot of them probably have absolutely no idea what VR is in general. So adding that to it, but in the end, I think it was very, very positive. We were a little bit worried actually about how the reactions were going to be for the seniors, particularly if there's going to be any disorientation. We were careful not to choose anybody with dementia in case it was a trigger or something like that. But the overall impression was that we really had a good time. We just wish we could practice more. So they were very positive in that they wanted to not just, it was too bad that I couldn't do more. It was more like, I want to practice more so I can have more fun next time. So they're really positive that, if that answers sort of both those things at once there.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's the note on the onboarding and the sort of getting familiar is something that due to the time that we did, we just sort of dove in. And so again, that's where I was saying this is good the way that VR Together is designed, because we still had success. I do think that a lot of application experiences would just totally fail in that because they are so complex. It's still though like something to take in for thinking about doing a user research study, as well as that we really didn't have any, we did have a little write-up, but I think Kenji had that in the presentation, that we should improve the template for when you do a research study, make sure you really familiarize and orientate to the device, because yeah, it's very unknown. We're gonna take one last question because we are getting close to time, and I like this question. Could there be features that kids could unlock by earning points for interacting or guiding or teaching others?
I guess it's a question for the software itself, and Richard was raising hands too.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer, and I think I could discuss what I raised my hand about as well. So there's a researcher that I met recently, Dulce Rodriguez, and their PhD was around a series of, I'm gonna do a terrible job of describing this, but they had young kids and older adults learning something that neither was familiar with at the same time. And it wasn't virtual reality, but talking to them was really interesting about that project. And so hearing what you all are talking about today, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was really interesting, that idea of like, if two people aren't terribly familiar with something, they're at kind of the same level and you can have them collaboratively learn and explore that. I guess that leads into the question about points. We haven't considered it, but I would love the idea because my background is in gaming and I'm a big believer and fan of gaming or gamification when it's done well, as a way of motivating people or inspiring them to do things that, if it's beneficial to the experience or to others, to provide that motivation for them, or the reinforcement, oh, I got this thing that I enjoy, and I enjoy doing this, so I'll do it more. All of this to me just like, I guess conceptually, is very fascinating. The idea of, say, incentivizing the younger group through awards or points to help in the process of teaching that, and then also using the experience not just to provide an experience, but like the experience of learning how to do this thing together as what I think are the best tutorials and interactive things, which is when you don't realize it's a tutorial, you end up learning how to do the thing and you didn't even know that the whole first part of it was onboarding you into it. So yeah, I guess the short answer, I love the idea. We haven't discussed it at this point, but certainly are interested in it.
Actually, before the testing, I was very worried that kids might get bored easily because we don't have any points system or any like certain achievement. So my worry was that seniors enjoy the simple environment, but I was worried about the kids. But it turned out that kids really enjoyed without any purpose or points, maybe because it was their first experience. But kids seem to enjoy like simple thing about being on the beach and throwing the blocks for no reason. So yeah, that was a good surprise. So at certain point, kids can enjoy without certain goals or points. But yeah, maybe it's different if they do it again and again. So that'll be a very interesting thing to explore, I think.